Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Huxley, COO of Syscom Business Technologies. Happy to greet everyone here today. We are doing it off camera today, full disclosure, with cameras off, not because either myself or Leslie are camera shy, but really we wanted everyone today to kind of focus in on the content at hand, which is a tricky subject, which is kind of people. So again, welcome everyone for joining us today. The session is being recorded, will be available for you later. Leslie, first webinar that we've done together. Thank you for joining us. Tell everyone a little bit about you.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Scott, and really appreciate the invitation. So my background has been a career in human resources and employee assistance. And so I've worked with a number of employers, and I say I have helped employers and help employers solve their trickiest people problems. And one of those problems is that difficult conversation. And so if people want to learn more, they can go to my website. It's got my bio and all kinds of information and all the kinds of things I can do. So if they want to learn more, what I really want to find out today, Scott, is what brought people here. I'm so curious to know always about why people show up for things. And so I think that you have a poll so we can find out. Is that right?
I do, yeah. I was waiting for the 20-minute bio about yourself.
Now we're going to do
that. Yeah. So let me go ahead and launch the first poll for everyone today, and it is for sure one of the most challenging topics, which is our interaction with people. Obviously, we are an IT company. Technology is what we do, but every facet of business involves people. I think this will kind of give a semblance for why we're here today. And a side tangent, I think the people that really needed to be here, Leslie, probably aren't here, right?
That's always true.
So.
And one thing I will say, Scott, while people are taking that poll,
yes, yep.
If somebody has a question or a comment or something and they want to drop something in the chat, we'll take those at the end. But I do encourage people to, while they're thinking of it, so they don't lose the thought or want to make a comment or question, feel free to do that anytime. And I know at the end you're going to kind of monitor those and help me out with that. But
yes, I'll be happy to monitor the chat for sure. Appreciate everyone's input. We wanted to make it as interactive as we could. Nobody wants to sit here for 30 minutes and be bored, so we wanted to make it as interactive as we could. And also it helps Leslie as well and myself to kind of get a semblance for where people are at. And I'm going to go ahead and close out there and share the first poll. Appreciate everyone's input on that one. And while we wait there, I will go ahead and just so there we go. Let's jump into the first poll real quickly. There we go. We're here, Leslie, because we could all improve.
All right, awesome. So there's no one that is just killing time. That's a relief.
It's very reassuring that people didn't just use our time.
An immediate need. I need help. I've got something coming up. So if that's the case, feel free to connect with me afterwards. And there's never a charge for an initial conversation to see if what I do could be helpful. So know that.
Yeah, that was interesting to see. We all need help. I would agree with that too. We could always improve.
Yeah. So, all right, there we go. So here's what I want to cover today. I want to give you a process because I believe in two things. Number one, I love processes because I think they're very important. And number two, preparation is the key to success in almost everything we do. I know that I have failed more times than not when I've just decided, oh, I can wing this. No, we need to prepare. And then talking about maintaining calm. I believe when I keep my cool, somebody else will keep theirs, not always. So what do you do if somebody, we'll talk about if somebody else gets their, if they get upset. And then mindset, because again, I believe mindset in most everything we do plays a huge part. So that's what I want to cover today. Oh, I went backwards, sorry.
There we go.
So we got another poll for you, because I'm always curious to know what comes to mind when you think about difficult conversations. So rather than giving you free form, we have a poll that and it may not exactly meet what you think about, but I think we're pretty spot on with the choices we have. So Scott, you want to go ahead and share that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share it. So for me, when I think about a difficult conversation, it's usually something maybe that I don't want to have, that I may have been putting off.
Yeah.
For me, most of us in business have had some interaction with this type of conversation with people, and it's usually around accountability of some degree. But yes, it's something, I guess, if I had to pick one, maybe it would be, I know I should have it with them, but I don't want to, because I don't think a lot of times we look forward to it, right? We don't really, yeah, we know we got to have it, but there's eight other things we would rather do. So again, I want to thank everyone for kind of giving their input here. It's getting really close here on the background. Let me know when to close it out. It's getting really close. And I may not be alone. I'm going to give you a hint here for the poll results, but I may not be alone. So I'm going to close it out real quickly. Again, I appreciate everyone's input. And we're actually tied on this one. So let me go ahead and close it out and share it with everyone so that you can see. It was close, but we're neck and neck here. With some acceptance, Leslie, that it's just part of what we do.
Part of it just is, it's part of what we do. Maybe I'm a little relieved to know that no one said, bring it, right? Let's go.
Bring it. Yeah, bring them into my door. I'll bring them through into my office, and I'll give them a piece of my mind.
Yeah, so one of the things I just quickly, while it's on my mind, and I want to say it before I forget, just switching that from, you said I have to, it's just something I have to do. And so instead of obligation, looking at it as opportunity. So I get to, I want to, I choose to, instead of I have to, I should, or I must.
Yeah,
just
good point.
Use that a little bit in our head and helps it make it better. So I want to share with you what I feel is a preparation tool to help you. But before we get into that framework, let me set you up with a story that is taken from true life. The details are not akin to one particular situation. It's kind of a combination. But just imagine that we've got these two people, and many companies have similar roles, right? They've got a VP of sales, that's Jack, and they've got a VP of operations, that's Jill. Now, whatever that is in your organization might have a different title, but you've got somebody drumming up business and somebody delivering on the business. And if you're an entrepreneur and it's all you, well, then it's all you. But Jill's new to the company, and Jack's been around for a lot of years. He has a long and storied history, and he is the company rainmaker. He can make it happen. Now, at this week's staff meeting, Jack announces the acquisition of a new customer. And in revealing the details of the order, it becomes clear Jack has not followed any of the company protocols to onboard the new customer and promised order specifications and delivery date that is going to be next to impossible for Jill's team to accomplish. The company owner, Harry praises Jack's work openly and cuts Jill off when she tries to get clarification from Jack about why he failed to follow established processes and procedures regarding the new customer and special orders. So our polling question has to do with, what would you say to Jill? And again, we're going to force you some answers. We're not going to let you do free form. But what advice would you have for Jill? So go ahead and launch that poll, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. Be my pleasure. And while we wait for people to take their time and give us some feedback on that, I think that we've all probably been in a similar situation, maybe not exactly as described. It sounds like it was taken from, a real life scenario, but it's a scenario nevertheless that a lot of people have faced, and a lot of times, if you're on the admin side, sales often wins, right? A lot of times business owners like just do what you have to keep the sales engine going. So sometimes we don't quite get the support, right? Maybe that we should.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it's just like, well, you overpromise to the customer, so it's you got to figure that out, right? Has nothing to do. So yeah.
Yeah, it's one quick way of figuring out, kind of team dynamics, so to speak. And a lot of times, sales is the one that's kind of the default. Like, you just got to deal with it. We know you overpromise, but do it anyway. So appreciate everyone's input here. I'm ready here to close it out real quickly. And I'd be interested to, I'm gonna go ahead and close it. Appreciate everyone's input. Share the result with everyone. I don't know, Leslie, if this is a surprise for you. Obviously, you've done this a few times, our first webinar together, but this isn't your first rodeo. You've been doing this for some time, so I don't know if that is a surprise to you or.
Well, yes and no, because a lot of times that's what happens, right? We just figure out we're going to make it work. It doesn't matter, who cares. Now, my question always is, then why do you have the process or procedure in the first place if you're not going to follow it? I mean, you might, there's probably a reason, but then really talking to Jack and saying, you know what, we've got to make this work, and we can work. So that is a perfect lead in to what I want to talk about next, because I do believe preparation is key. And so here's a, I don't know, I call it a mnemonic, I've called it an acronym, but it's based on the word because. And I want to talk to you because, and the first reason is, or the first step is figuring out why. Why is this conversation important? But more important than that is, why is this person important? Now, if you think about the fact that both Jack and Jill are there to serve the customer, we're all there. We're all in our roles to serve our customer. Because if it wasn't for the customer, we wouldn't be here, so to speak. Nobody would have a job because the customer pays the bills. I don't have to state the obvious, but sometimes I don't know why this person is important to me. I get that from people. Well, I don't know. I can't stand them. Well, don't you want your work time to be the best it can possibly be? So therefore, don't you want to make an effort to build that relationship and make that relationship as good as it can be? And maybe the fact of the matter is, we just have to learn to be polite to one another, and we have to learn how to figure this out. But I really want to get you to think about why. So I want to talk to you because, and so there's a letter, each letter is going to stand for something. So let's talk about behavior. When I start the conversation, so I might, if I was Jill, I might say something to Jack like, you know, Jack, at our staff meeting, I noticed that you shared this new customer acquisition. Kudos to you. You also shared that none of our processes and procedures were followed in your sales order. Can you tell me what's going on, or can you help me understand that? Something along those lines. So now, what other thing I often talk about is tardiness. This tardiness is easy to see and hear, if you will. You probably can't hear it, but again, what can I see and what can I hear? Describe the behavior. Avoid judgment words. And judgment words are, I say, adverbs and adjectives. They don't really lend anything to the conversation. You know, they're lazy and careless and stupid, those kind of descriptor words. They're my opinion. They don't lend anything to the description. And we also want to not tell stories about why it happened. You know, I said Jack had a long and storied history with a company. That can mean many things. And Jill may have heard many things because she's new. So people have probably told her about Jack. Set aside those assumptions and simply focus on opening, Jack, you're my valued colleague. I want this to work. And here's what I've seen. Here's what I've noticed. So we talk about behavior, because when you do that, when you fail to follow protocol, well, that puts the project in jeopardy, or that could put the order in jeopardy, or our company's reputation is on the line. But describe the effect the behavior is having on the team, on the company, on the individual. And then what's got to be different? What's a new future look like? So Jack, we'll do our best at this point in time to make sure this happens this time. Going forward, however, we need clarity. You know, we've got the processes and procedures in place. They're there for a reason, those kinds of. So next time, I want to encourage you to think about the fact that it will not benefit either one of us to try to force agreement on the details of an event that's happened in the past. Let's have our conversation be future oriented and solution, or we'll talk about solutions in just a few minutes. But what's a new future look like together? Or Jack, I know you are so anxious to get new business. It's so important for us. And I'm sure that the customer maybe had some pressure or something. Let's agree that next time you'll call me and we'll talk about it, or we'll make some plans in advance, or, you know, so getting his buy-in to what can be helpful and helping him know that you're on his side.
Quick question, quick
yes.
question, Leslie. So to the point of, you know, again, difficult conversation, as you know, hence the webinar title. But for the people that are, you know, on the webinar today that may be having to have a conversation with an employee, I want to go back to your first comment about understanding the why, which I think is critical, right? The why is when we say typically, I'm going to need to speak to you tomorrow, like, or we're going to, you know, these days, you know, thanks to COVID or whatever, but, you know, a virtual meeting with you tomorrow. What you're saying is, if I'm going to have a conversation with a colleague, or people on the webinar today are going to have a conversation with someone that they need to speak about, you've got to be clear on the why. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I would say sooner rather than later. So what happens when someone says to me, I want to talk to you tomorrow? So just example that happened to me. So I've been doing some work with a client and we're doing some workshops, and my contact emailed me yesterday and said, you know, I want to give you some feedback about Thursday's session. This was yesterday's session. I'm like, oh boy. So, you know, feedback is such a nebulous term. You don't know what, and it was
right.
fun.
Yeah, exactly.
But still, I had to wait till, again, sometimes that's the case because we're busy, time doesn't allow, but the sooner the better. And then helping, so frame it, you know, I want to give you some feedback. Well, I want to tell you what went right, what went wrong. I want to, you know, whatever. So thanks for asking that.
Yeah, because I think there's a sense of dread, right? Like someone said, hey, I need to speak to you tomorrow. We have a meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock and I don't know why we're having the meeting. It's probably not good. The brain sometimes defaults to the negative, I guess.
Not sometimes, always, unless we reach. That's a topic.
Well, that's why we're having the webinar. You see, I've already learned something. It's not sometimes, it's all the time. But anyway, Karen.
Well, and the other thing, so it says allow them time to respond. This is not a one-way conversation, obviously, and I want to share this just to put your a framework to think about how do I want this to go and what do I want to make sure I cover. But when I talk about what needs to be different next time, this is a chance for them to respond. And I believe silence can be a very effective communication tool. Most of us aren't very comfortable with silence. Now, we didn't practice this, Scott, so that's
it was difficult. There's a few people on the webinar that know me, so they know that I can't shut up. So it was very difficult for me. I agree with you. Yes, I'm one that struggles with that for sure.
So as the guide, right? If I've initiated the conversation, I'm the guide to the conversation. I can use it as an effective tool because most of us will fill that dead air. So learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable, learning to be comfortable with silence, and so just allowing them time to respond is the A.
2 ears, 1 mouth, right?
Exactly. And I love what Douglas Stone says, and I'm sure many people on the line have read his book, and there was 3 or 4 other authors, and there's a couple of titles out there that are really excellent titles on this whole subject. But he said, you know, people almost never change without feeling understood. And Covey, 30 years ago, said, seek first to understand, then be understood. And if you've not read his 7 Habits, or it's been a while, go back and reread it. Covey writes about 4 autobiographical responses. So we're evaluating, we're either agreeing or disagreeing, we're asking probing questions, but it's from our frame of reference, or we're giving advice. We're trying to figure out their motives, their behavior, and it's based on our own motives and behavior, and that's not always true. So there's a probably 4 or 5 page description in the 7 Habits book under habit 5, which is seek first to understand. That's a beautiful description of a conversation between a father and son that changes when the father really steps in and listens and wants to do his best to understand where his son is coming from. And I think that same beauty can happen at work. And I believe some of these principles probably apply in your personal life. I'm just not a personal relationship therapist. I focus on people's relationships at work. So we talked about being solution oriented and future focused, and the fact that it will not benefit either one of us to try to force agreement on what happened in the past. And 2 reasons for that. Every time I remember a situation, it changes just a little bit in my head. My memory changes. And when I'm thinking about it, I make myself look just slightly better than I make you look. So in my own head. So that's not going to benefit it. What are we going to do next time, right? So let's agree that da 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 da. So in Jack and Jill, let's agree. You know, Jack, you're going to call, you're going to do this or whatever it is. And I know we can work this out. Now it says express faith in them. If you are a leader and this is your subordinate, expressing faith in their ability to do it is a really good thing. But let's say we're peers, like Jack and Jill are peers in the organization. Hey, I know we can work this out. I know that this will be helpful and we can move this forward.
So yeah, it's not this situation. Sorry to interrupt, but it's not a situation of, hey, do as what I said, otherwise you're fired, right? Like
exactly.
Do it my way, or you won't have a job.
Yeah. Well, and I know there's people. I worked for somebody like that. People on the line have probably worked. And again, I think the challenge with that style today, that leadership style today, is there's too many choices for employment elsewhere. And we don't necessarily have to work for someone that operates in that way.
Yeah, good point.
But yeah, so let's return to our story. And let's just imagine that Jack and Jill have had a conversation, but it's 3:30 because they what was the second highest? They figured it out, right? They did it on that poll. And the day before the order is scheduled to go into production. So Jill checks the work order. Again, Jack's failed to enter any data or special instructions into the system. And Jill knows if the production run is started without this information, it's going to cause significant rework and downtime. Jill's heard a rumor. Jack's on the golf course with their best customer. Jack's admin says, Jack didn't give me the information, and I don't think he's coming back to the office today. Jill tried to reach Jack on his cell phone, but she's unsuccessful. Jill's son is in a championship ball game that evening, and she needs to leave work on time so she can be at that game. Production is scheduled to start tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. What advice do you have for Jill? So I think, do we have one more poll or did we?
We do. I'm glad you teed it up so nicely for me. Let me go ahead and launch that real quick. So yes, this is the last poll. So again, I appreciate everyone's input as you go through and evaluate your options here. Maybe not everyone's been through an exact scenario, but a variant thereof. And I think, good shout out for your book, by the way, for the Stephen Covey book, which I'm due to re-listen on Audible again. A really good recommendation for that, because it's as true today as it was when that book was first put together. But what was that?
It's timeless, yes.
It is, for sure. And a reminder to me that I need to re-listen. But yeah, we may not have had this exact situation, but we've had something similar to it, and be interested to see people's input, to see to see where we go, and seen some answers already. So I'm curious to see where we stack up on it. And I think every interaction we have has an end product, right? An end result.
Yeah.
So whether it be action or inaction, there is an end result of what we did or didn't do. So I'm going to go ahead and so we're done here. I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll and share it with everyone. So go ahead and close it, share it with everyone so you can see. Hopefully everyone on the webinar today can see it. So as you can see, Leslie, bunch of logical thinkers on the call today, enlist the help of Jack's admin before production. So I don't know if that's what you're expecting, but that's what the group has for us today.
No, that's great. So that's, and I mean, I didn't expect anything other than smart people on the call, but sometimes we trip ourselves up. And I'm really glad to see nobody was going to be waiting to jump Jack in the morning, so to speak, and give him a piece of your mind. That's good.
Yeah, there was someone here who allow production to start and let the chips fall. Well, we'll talk to you later after the webinar. But yes, generally speaking, 67% we're looking to enlist the help and work through someone else, which is good to hear.
Yeah, that is good news. So I believe composure is so important. And when we get upset and our heart beats at over 100 beats a minute, we literally lose our ability to hear. So we're not, let alone listening, we're not hearing. So we are no longer communicating. I think breathing techniques can help. Now, here's the thing about breathing techniques is you have to know them before you need to use them. And there's a number of them out there. One of the most common is using counts. So counting to 4 on the inhale, holding your inhale for 4, counting to 4 on the exhale, and holding your exhale for 4. And what I know from personal experience, and because I have a fitness tracking device, I can drop my heartbeat about 10 beats a minute when I focus on my breathing. So the good thing about this is if I've practiced, it's ready for me when I need it, and no one has to know I'm doing it. You know, if I'm Jill and I'm talking with Jack, or vice versa, if I'm Jack and I'm talking with Jill and I'm feeling myself getting a little bit heated, I can focus on my breath and calm myself down. The other thing is to visualize the meeting going smoothly and send positive information towards that person. When we're upset with someone, we usually think, oh, there's, you know, not so nice things about them. And we're probably calling them names in our head that we might not even say out loud in some cases. What if we turned it around? What if we thought about this person in the best possible light and say, you know what? They are well intended. There's just something that I don't know that's getting in their way. Or I can think of them and say, you know what? I wish you success. I wish you the best. It's a whole different framework. And then speaking positively about the situation. I think this happens often. We're talking about an upcoming something, let's say a meeting, and Jill's talking to maybe her admin or somebody on her team, or maybe at home at night, maybe her spouse or her kids or the people she lives with. And she's saying, you know what, I can't, I don't want to go in tomorrow. I've got this thing. It's going to be awful. It's going to be terrible. I know how Jack's going to respond. And we build this up in our heads so it's awful. And so I'm going to say, avoid doing that. Stop doing that. Think about it. It's going to be good. It's going to be the best it can be. It may not be perfect, but it's going to be good. We're going to come to a solution, and I know we're going to work it out. I know I'm going to maintain my cool. I know Jack's going to maintain his cool. The other thing about composure that I just wanted to add, Scott, is that, and you talked a little bit about how our brains work. So we have something called mirror neurons. And it's true, I believe, on camera as well as it is face to face. When we're watching someone and we see them getting upset. You can see people getting upset through their facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, all that kind of thing. We are likely to mirror that response. In other words, send it back. Dr. John Gottman with the Gottman Institute, and he is a family or marital therapist. He's studied couples for 40 years. He says he can predict the outcome of a conversation with 96% accuracy simply based on the way it starts. So if I start in a calm, relaxed manner, guess what? I'm going to probably finish in a calm, the conversation is going to go that way. But if I get upset or the other person and we just escalate from there, not a very good outcome. And I don't know if you're a gambler, Scott, but I kind of like 96% odds.
I'm a terrible gambler. I really don't gamble. But you bring up a really interesting point. We go to the next slide. So a lot of times people are into, starting a difficult conversation from an emotional standpoint, right? Like they're mad about something. I'm mad and frustrated. Therefore, I think to your point, Leslie, you're going into it with the wrong. You're not going to get as good an outcome as if you came into the conversation in a calm fashion versus being angry.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Too many times we enter it into with an angry. We're mad about something, so we want to bring that person in and give them a piece of our mind.
Exactly, because they deserve it, right?
Yes, they got it coming.
Well, and again, if I can switch my thinking to say, you know what, I don't know what's happening, but I want to find out. I want to be curious. If you can become that mythical Sherlock Holmes and come at it from curiosity. And I really think Stone has it right where he says it's about perceptions, conflicting perceptions, interpretations, and values. So I just want to quickly talk a little bit about perceptions, because let's say Jack believes we should do, as an organization, our company should do everything they can to satisfy the customer. Now, Jill, on the other hand, doesn't believe in breaking any rules or guidelines to keep the customer happy. So those are two totally different perceptions that, if they're not careful, could really cause Jack and Jill some angst and some problems. It's almost like this next image. I want to shift from you're wrong to we're in this together. So I'm hoping you can see that, yep. One guy's looking at a 6, one guy's looking at a 9. Yeah, you just haven't seen life from my side. And chances are we haven't. So what I want to do is be able to search for that perspective, and that's where curiosity can help me. Tell me more. If I shift from you're wrong, Jack, you're wrong, Jack, you're a whatever, fill in the blank, whatever name you want to call him, to, hey, we are both here to serve the customer. Let's figure this out. I want my production people busy. I want to make sure we deliver a good product or a good service if you're not delivering a product per se. But we tend to see only our side. I always jokingly say, what is everyone's favorite radio station? WIIFM. What's in it for me? So if I can find out what's in it for that other person, because that's their perspective.
Yep. Good point.
What about values? Now again, value speed versus accuracy. Sometimes there's a mismatch, but neither are wrong. A lot of companies are thinking about how can we differentiate ourselves. Maybe it's speed, maybe it's accuracy, maybe it's something else, but values can be a source of conflict, again, if we're not careful and if we're not willing to have the conversation. And it might be an interpretation. How do people see, I picked on an annual sales meeting, but there's any number of things that happen in companies that people interpret in a different way. And it often can be only with the passage of time that we can reflect back on a situation. Sometimes what we thought was the worst day of our life turns out to be the best day of our life, but that's only after some passage of time. And so we've all experienced things that we don't see initially as the other person sees them. So if I'm willing to explore, so tell me more about that, Jill. Like we've got this annual sales meeting coming up and I'm looking forward to it. and you're questioning a few things on my budget, tell me more about that, because I think these are items that are important, right? I think it's important that we, now probably companies aren't doing this so much now, but maybe they're getting ready to go to a place out of state, out of town, out of country to celebrate and have some sales awards. Jack sees it as an opportunity and Jill doesn't, so vice versa. So being willing to just have those conversations around how are you seeing this in your interpretation. There's a story that's told of a farmer who a long time ago, before machinery was in fashion, had a lot of calamities happen to him. The horse broke and ran away. His son broke his leg. There was all these kinds of things. But every time they came together in the evening as a village, the villagers would say, "Oh my gosh, that's awful," or "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." And the farmer's response was the same every time. You never know. Because we don't know often until retrospect. So if we can take that stance and, you know what, you just never know, and interpret it later, not in the moment. So here's a checklist. And I know that this is being recorded and you will get the recording, but if you want to take a screenshot, you're more than welcome. And if you want, on my website, if you are so inclined and you sign up for my blog every week, you'll get this in a 12-point, much more detailed point. So I'll offer that because you're here today. But just a checklist to see if you're on track. And
Yeah,
Scott,
I'll add to that too. So for the people obviously that have registered, you'll get a copy of today's presentation as well. So if there's some key takeaways here that you want to kind of look at again or share with someone else, if you did register, that'll be available to you together with a video as well.
Thanks. And I believe showing appreciation to someone for their willingness to come to the table can make such a big difference. Thanking them. You might even go so far as writing a note, a thank you note. I believe that we are not grateful enough sometimes in our work life and appreciative enough about other people. So thanking them. So just a few things as we are coming to the end of our time together, and I want to be very aware because I know people have really busy schedules, but open-ended questions. What questions are better than why? Why can be, if we're not careful, a little bit accusatory. So why'd you do that? Well, it sounds like mom or dad asking us when we were a kid, but what made you make that choice, or what was the driving force behind that, or tell me more about that. Using silence. Reflective listening is a skill that can be learned. It takes practice over time, but it's a very effective tool. So Scott, what I thought I heard you say was you felt really pressured. Well, I shouldn't have used your name. I should have used Jack, because that's who we're telling the story about. You felt really pressured to deliver to this customer because you feel like the long-term business relationship could be in jeopardy. Do I have that accurate? Something checking back, but reflective listening. I know people have, I'm sure, had courses or seminars or workshops on that fact. Get agreement on what we're going to do next time and who's going to follow through. Now, I think that email is a great documentation tool. It's a terrible communication tool. People try to solve problems and communicate using email. Document what you've decided to do via email. That's a really good use of email. And then get agreement on next steps and follow through. And talk about, hey, if this doesn't work, if our best laid plans fall apart, what are we going to do? Whose responsibility is it to raise that issue again? How do we make sure we stay on track? What are we going to do to prevent an occurrence? And sometimes you need an outside resource. You might need a mediator, might use your employee assistance program. You might need additional training and coaching. I can help with one of those, not all three. My background, as you know, is EAP, and I know some very skilled and trained mediators if you need a connection there. But let's think about the 3 keys to mastery. It's that planning and preparation. It's following that mnemonic I gave you. It's remaining calm, and it's approaching it with the right mindset. So I know one of the things that people always ask me, Scott, because we're going to get into questions, and I
Yes.
think that's where we're going next.
Correct.
Is, and I think you've got a couple too, but how do I start this out? I really don't know what to say at the very beginning. And I just don't know what the right words are. So again, I've got a tip sheet on starting the conversation, but starting it with appreciation. So, and I'll use you now, Scott. Just, hey, Scott, you know what? You're a valued colleague. And I've noticed lately, whatever it is I've noticed, I'd really like to talk about that. Would you be open to a conversation? Now, if he tells me no, and he might, then I've got to say, okay, well, that's really interesting. I was hoping we could. Okay, I'll respect that. That kind of leaves me in a space where I'm not sure what to do. And so if you can push a little more, they might come back. But if you don't ask the question, the answer is always no. So be willing to ask and start, I think, in an appreciative stance.
Yeah, all very great points for sure. And again, in the spirit of the webinar today, Syscom, myself, we thank you, Leslie, for giving us your time and helping people improve, their interactions with people. And I hope and wish that people have taken some insight from you today. So personally, it's been fun working with you. I've enjoyed working on this webinar. And again, hope people will get some key takeaways from it. A couple of questions that we did receive. The first one, obviously, which maybe you touched on a little bit, is kind of where to start. Can we kind of recircle on that one a little bit? Where should people start with those types of discussions? Where do we begin?
Again, I want to talk to you because that why. Okay. And then just a simple statement of a recap. If I talk about behavior, so quick story. Imagine, now when I was a teenager, Scott, maybe you too, it was before cell phones. Anyway, I'm late. Mom and Dad said curfew was 11 and I roll in the door at midnight. Usually there's going to be a question that's asked. Where have you been? Do you know what time it is? Something along those lines. Well, in the case of the teen, we know we've got our story all straightened around, right? We know we're an hour late. But when I begin a conversation with a colleague or a direct report, or even a customer for that matter, and I start with a question, it can have a tendency to put somebody on the defensive. So I believe people are better served if they start with a statement of behavior, just something that describes. So I noticed, again, I'll go back to our story with Jack and Jill. Jack, you clearly did not follow any of the established protocols, and clearly is probably a judgment word. So Jack, I noticed that when you told us about this new customer acquisition, all of our protocols were not followed. Can you tell me about that, or help me understand why that happened?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that sometimes people ask about is, because we talked about avoidance and it has to do with anxiety, and yes, these are anxiety producing. I understand that. No, I don't think anybody gets up in the morning and says, oh, yay, I get to go talk to somebody, and it's going to be hard to talk to them about this icky thing that I've got to talk about. It's pretty rare.
Yeah,
but if I can frame it, and I get to choose to, different light, but doing some things to calm. Journaling can be helpful. Breathing techniques can be helpful. Meditation techniques can be helpful. There's all kinds of things you can do to get rid of that anxiety and come at it from a calm place.
So we have one last question left as we get towards the end here, and then the final question I have for you, Leslie, which most of us have experienced at some point, which is what to do when the conversation gets heated, right? Irrespective of how we phrase the conversation, the person is angry, right, for whatever reason. What is your your advice for that?
So doing your best to maintain calm. Usually when people get mad or angry, their rate of speech increases and their pitch increases, their volume increases. So the more I can slow down my speech, the more I can lower my voice, lower my tone, especially if somebody has to really lean in. If I dropped my volume and dropped my tone, and they might stop. Now they might not, they might just run right over me, but saying, wow, I can appreciate that you're really upset right now. Should we take a break and come back? You know, sometimes people don't get loud and angry, but they cry. That happens too. And that can be uncomfortable. So saying, hey, do you just need a minute? You know, when I was leading a team of people, I always had a tissue box in my office, or there was always one in the conference room, depending on where, because you never know. And just letting somebody have a tissue, composing themselves, you need a moment. You know, should we come back to this? But saying to someone, I really want to talk to you about this issue. I have a couple of ground rules about people getting angry too. I'm not going to be called names. You're not going to use profanity. And so if I hear those, I will stop the conversation, just say, hey, I really want to resolve this, but I have a couple, you know, please don't want to continue in that way. And that happens again, we end it. It's like, we're done. We're going to come back to this another time because I can't listen to you when you do that.
Yeah, and probably a completely different conversation the next day, I'm sure, or later on in the afternoon or evening or something like that, because of the emotion attached to the discussion. So yeah, some very good points. That's the questions that we had. Again, I want to thank everyone that attended today. Again, it will be available if you're registered. The presentation day will be sent to you together with a video. Leslie, it's been a complete pleasure working with you. Again, I urge you, if you have not gotten to know Leslie, take the time to do so. But I want to thank everyone on the call today. And Leslie, one more final time, and we'll let everyone, Leslie, hopefully not go away and have a difficult conversation, or if they are today, hopefully it's easier.
Yeah, thanks. I hope so too. I appreciate the opportunity, Scott, and thanks to everyone who took the time to be with us today.
Take care, everyone.